My name is Jill Phillips and I'm the creator of Whose Shoes, a popular approach to co-production. I was named as an HSJ 100 wildcard and want to help give a voice to others talking about their ideas and experiences. I'll be chatting with people from all sorts of different perspectives, walking in their shoes. If you are interested in the future of healthcare and like to hear what other people think, or perhaps even contribute at some point, Whose Shoes Wildcard is for you. Okay, so today it's my great pleasure to welcome my pirate friend, Carol Munt, one of the HSJ top 50 patient leaders in the country. I'm delighted to speak to you, Carol, as I like your common sense approach to quality improvement in healthcare. Really pragmatic and down to earth. You have so many different hats and lots of fingers in pies. Oh, and it's not everyone who writes a poem about me, so thank you for that. Could you tell us a bit more about yourself and what's important to you, Carol?
Yes, I will, and thank you for asking me to sail with you.
In our ship.
Yeah, I won't jump ship. I'll carry on. I got involved speaking about patients and how being treated by the NHS was affecting them. When my mother was ill, she had dementia and vascular dementia, and I would drive her to play bridge with her friends in the early stages, and when I picked her up, I'd say, "How were they?" And she'd say, "Oh, so-and-so's operation's been cancelled, and so-and-so hasn't had physio," and you know, bemoaning the fact that it appeared to all of these ladies that once you get to be of a certain age, the NHS doesn't care about you anymore. And the irony is that was 6 years ago, something like that. I was already involved with the NHS at that stage, but the things that my mum was saying, like, you know, it appears that the NHS or the health service doesn't care about people that are older, has really come to roost with the fiasco of visiting in care homes. And I suppose the nitty-gritty of it is that the health service treats patients or treats people when they are in hospital as though they are a condition that needs to be diagnosed and treated, and misses the bigger picture of the fact that patients are people and we're all different, and a lot of us have got things to offer the NHS. With COVID, it appeared that came to the fore when communities were making scrubs and masks, and people with 3D printers were making face masks for the NHS because, without going into the politics, there wasn't enough equipment around. And so I think a message needs to be taken from this, and that is that it's no longer acceptable for there to be a divide between the NHS and the people that the NHS treat. And I'm using the NHS as a blanket term here because the NHS to me is all the people that work in a hospital or work in the community. It's the doctors, it's the ambulance drivers, it's everybody involved in somebody's health. And I think we have used lots of different words in the NHS, which make it somewhat difficult for people to understand sometimes. There's a terminology, NHS speak, because some of the words that are used are just much too difficult for the normal person to understand. The acronyms that are used are extremely difficult, to the point that sometimes I'm sure even the NHS people don't understand them. So I'm a passionate advocate for co-production, or whatever you want to call it. I'm a passionate advocate for patients being involved with staff to actually improve and better the relationship between the two, and also to be involved whenever there's a strategic decision being made about patients. The expression, nothing about me without me, was marvellous when it came out, but I think we've got a terrible tendency to come up with expressions and to come up with pilot projects and to come up with massive ideas, and they run for 6 months and then they're put on the back boiler. So Anyway, that's pretty much where I come from. I've got type 1 narcolepsy as a result of a serious road accident where I had a fractured skull and a brain hemorrhage and was in a coma for a period of time, and then flown back from France where the accident happened, flown back to the UK. And that was when I was 38, so I've had it for a few years now. So I've seen the inside of hospitals, and also I'm a qualified nurse, so I've actually seen it from both sides of the fence. So is that a good enough explanation of me? I mean, there's lots of other words that people use, but some of them probably not repeatable.
I think it gives an insight into you, Carol, and I think I find it fascinating when I guess the fact that people like to put people in boxes, and you really don't fit in a box, but actually not very many people don't fit in boxes. But for you, it's obvious if you've been a member of staff and a patient and caring for your mum. I think that's what I meant at the beginning by you've got so many hats, and I think that gives you such a richness in terms of insight.
People fascinate me. I mean, photography is probably my main hobby, and it's photographing people. And, when I travel, it's photographing people from a distance or photographing them at work and all the rest of it. And I think having travelled a lot and having seen different cultures, it really brings it home that in the UK we are so fortunate to have an NHS service, National Health Service, but we're abusing it, if you like, in as much that it's not a national service anymore. It's so fragmented, and people are being set up in competition with each other. Hospital Foundation Trust, rather. See, that's a slip of the tongue, but I mean, there should be Hospital Financial Trust, really, because that's basically what it comes down to. Competing with each other for business and to be profitable, not the sort of profit that is commercial, but to keep the hospitals going. And I don't like the fact that in some areas you've got a hospital that's got a fantastic reputation and they're doing amazing things, and yet they don't share it with other people. So one end of the country, you can have a hospital that's got a fantastic record as far as stroke's concerned, and the other end of the country, you can have a hospital that's got an absolutely dismal record as far as stroke's concerned, and that's not a national system. So I really do wish that we could get away from the silos and start sharing information more, and accept that this is a system for patients. It's not a system for the people that run it to use it as a tool, if you like. So we've got to be involved far more in decisions that are made about hospitals, about where they're situated, about what time clinics are run. You have clinics, the ophthalmic clinic, good case in point, kids that are being called out of school lessons to go for an ophthalmic appointment at 12 o'clock midday or at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, when really, if the clinics put it down that they would see the children before school or after school, it would stop them being labelled at school, it would save the parents having to take time out of work, and it would be a lot better for all concerned. But that sort of thing isn't going to happen unless somebody says, actually, can you make it a bit more convenient for me? So
I think you're hitting upon so many things there. I mean, I think that whole fitting around the person, I mean, that's a really good example. Children at school, you don't want to be disrupting their education. And then you've got the family that sits behind it. So if mum's got to, or dad's got to, or whoever it might be, come and collect the child and make a big deal and take them off somewhere else. Whereas if things can happen in schools, and I mean, I know I've seen something recently about, let me think what the example was. So children in reception being monitored, they're new in school, so you monitor them for weight and height. Okay, last year, because of COVID, there wasn't much going on in terms of monitoring anything in schools. The children weren't at school, they were home learning. So if you're now in year 1, does that mean that you miss out on that check? Or does it mean that, if they've got to double the capacity because they've got all the new reception children, and some of the people that then end up falling through these gaps in the system? I think just following up on some of those things. And the other thing you mentioned, which I thought was really interesting, was the whole question around sharing good practice and we're both members of the Beneficial Changes Network, and there seems to be a very important and impressive drive really to share things more. But then I think of things, and I don't know what the answer is, but I think of the kind of culture of awards in healthcare. Now, awards could be improving standards, that's good. It's encouraging people to share good practice, which is good. But you have perhaps a winning team, or, you know, someone who doesn't put their entry in, and how the kind of whole culture of awards, I think, makes people feel, and whether it actually increases the sense of competition between people. So that's a kind of like whose shoes perspective in a way, exploring some of that. How do we share best practice in this public service? And you mentioned like a hospital at one end of the country or the other end of the country. Sometimes it's quite local, isn't it?
Yeah.
You get someone doing some really good practice and someone up the road could really benefit. Do you think, I mean, what's your experience of that? Do you think that's really improving, or is it just sort of hype, if you like?
Well, it's interesting you'd say about awards. I gave a talk at the King's Fund, I think it was about 4 years ago, and I said, I'm one of Health Service Journal's top 50 patient leaders, but I think it should be the top 500 because there's 499 other people out there that have done work that's, you know, equal to what I've done. Well, not necessarily that have done a lot more than I've done and a lot better. And said that, you know, the sad thing is that awards you can't give everybody an award. So it's almost like saying, well, in that case, don't give anybody an award, but just share the stuff that people are doing. And I used to say the NHS is bad at sharing stuff. And now I say the NHS is selfish because it doesn't share stuff. Because I think if you wanted the best treatment possible, you'd be on your bicycle going around the country, knocking on doors all over the place saying, oh, can I have my hip done here? And can I have my eyes done there? And what have you? And it's not acceptable. So I don't know how you share. I don't know how you do it. I think there is without doubt a culture that says, well, we're going to invent it here, and that there are so many wheels being invented in this country that the mind boggles. And of course, every time somebody starts from scratch, there's money wasted, there's time wasted, there's effort wasted, when if they just bothered to see what everybody else was doing, or people bothered to share what they were doing, it would be so much easier and quicker, and improvements could be made with hardly any effort at all. And that bugs me. It really does. I was involved in a project about the frontline staff reaction to patient feedback. And it culminated in one of the teams taking action on the fact that patients had said that the wards were noisy at night and that stopped them sleeping. So this team spent quite a lot of effort in finding earplugs and face masks and stuff to go around the lids of bins so they didn't make a lot of noise and everything. And they were so chuffed with themselves that they'd got this system all together. And then I said, yeah, if you'd looked, you'd see that St George's did that 4 years ago. And you could have got all the information from them, which would have saved you, you know, looking at how much you reckon that this cost you to put it all together. So what is the answer? Should you have to register when you do something good, or is it just assumed that it's part of everyday working? I don't know, because people are incredibly proud of what they do, and there's some fantastic stuff going on in the NHS, and there are people working in the NHS who come up with amazing ideas, and somehow or other, if I do something good, I kind of, maybe it's the fact that my father was American and the Yanks think differently to us, but I think if I do something good, or find something good, I'm as happy as Larry that I can share it with people. So I don't quite understand. I mean, I'll share the stuff that you do, Jill, because I think it's so good and so useful. And I don't understand what it is that stops other people sharing, because good stuff. I mean, my grandson's just got a first in maths and philosophy, and I think my friends are probably bored rigid with me saying, yeah, he's got a first. He rang me up and said he'd got a Damien, and I thought, what's that? And of course, a Damien Hirst, a first, Granny. So, why?
Keep up, Granny.
Yeah, wake up, Granny. Yeah, I've only just got used to the bit about, oh, that's sick. Oh, won't he like it? No, Granny, that's sick. That means he will. Now it's something totally different, and I'd only just got used to the last one. But I mean, why is it that there's this reluctance to say that we're good? I think if you've done something good, shout about it and let other people have the benefit of the work that you put in, and particularly bearing in mind that I'm talking about this in relation to improvements for patients and sometimes for staff as well. Why are we not sharing it so that patients all over the country can have the same benefit? That one floors me.
I think you've touched upon something very interesting there in terms of sort of human psychology. And some of the stuff that we do through Who's Shoes, we try and we come up with booklets of case studies and try and pick things that are readily transferable or very easily adaptable to a different place, and people like them. But there's also an energy around things that have come from your team, and where so-and-so does this and then so-and-so adds to it, and you get that kind of like team spirit. And I think, of the examples you've given, I mean, something like noise is not unique to one hospital. Patients are there, they're in bed. If they're like me, they don't sleep very well at the best of times, and noisy bins, noisy doors, people with voices, the whole trolleys or whatever it might be. So that would be a very easy one to say, for someone to look up and say, how can we improve noise levels? And it doesn't have to be from scratch. And some of the examples in neonatal units, I've seen a wonderful place where the lighting was just so low and everything was geared up as this is how it is as the norm, very, very, very quiet. And they got like little systems that showed that, hey, the noise levels are getting a little bit high here in a very subtle way. And I mean, I don't know whether that exists uniquely there, or it was actually in Ireland, or whether it's pretty much everywhere. I mean, obviously, with Who's Shoes, I'm sort of dabbling in so many different subjects, but just try and like put an idea out there, and people might say, oh, yeah, that happens everywhere. And sometimes they think it does, but it doesn't. I think people are very quick to say, oh, yes, we do that,
Yeah.
Rather than to reach up and pick up subtle improvements somewhere else and keep improving, keep growing, really. And of course, Carol, there's Fab NHS stuff, isn't there?
Oh, Fab NHS stuff is unbelievable. I think it's in its, gosh, I'm trying to think how many years it's been going. I know we got picked with the Learning Together programme in Oxford. We got picked as one of the runners-up for the first awards that they handed out. But the way that Roy Lilly's organised it is brilliant. If you've got a really good idea that you put into practice, then you just send it in to them and it's up on their website, and their website gets hit every day by thousands of people in the health service. So it's a brilliant way of sharing stuff. But over and above it being just on the website, there are annual events, there are Fab NHS ambassadors. It's a whole movement about sharing and getting good practice spread to other people, and I suppose really being unselfish. So yeah, Fab NHS stuff. Look them up. They're well worth the visit, and basically cover every aspect of things. And whenever I give talks to people, I always mention them.
So I'll share a link when I do the notes from the session, and people can dip into that. We both highly recommend it.
Yeah, thanks. And we have Expo, or we did have Expo. That's the annual thing where initially it was pretty much suppliers to the NHS that were showing their wares, so to speak. But then it became that the academic health science networks would show what they'd been doing. And over the last few years, it's been that different hospital trusts can actually show the good work that they've been doing. And I do wonder whether or not we need to start thinking about having a national event where each hospital sends a team that shows a new innovation or a new idea or a new concept, and makes it obvious that we've come up with this idea. The results were so much better for the patients, and that means that they were so much better for the staff, and you're welcome to follow, to take it on from us. I mean, the Always events with the different things that they do, that's easily shared. There's a glitch somewhere in the system. People at the front line are happy to share stuff. People who are working on it are probably happy to share, but there's a little glitch somewhere that actually stops it becoming a national project, a national thing to share stuff. So
And I think when you see someone doing really good work, so I've banged on, I think, in one or two of these episodes already about the work of Professor Becky Malby during the pandemic. She came up with the 10 Leaps report really, really early in terms of good stuff that was happening, community stuff, like you say, people jumping in and making PPE, and how are we going to hang on to all of this? And I know quite early on she came up with the idea of a festival of ideas.
Yeah.
So it sounds very, very similar to what you've just suggested. Wouldn't that be amazing, just to bring people together, just doing good stuff, and for other people to be able to think, well, you know, we could do that, or we're doing, you know, and just share everything around with a sort of spirit of excitement, I think, rather than this kind of, I mean, like the expression you used, you know, we need to invent it here. As you were talking then, Carol, I was thinking about a wonderful parent that I've started to work with in the neonatal world. I expect she'll be a podcast guest at some point. And she came up with going along to a meeting whereby she'd introduced herself as a parent. Now, she's also an academic doctor, but she'd introduced herself as a parent, and if I say there were a lot of men in suits in the room, probably slightly derogatory, but true, and they weren't listening. And one of the people there was very supportive of her and basically hardly rephrased, just basically said again what she'd said. And she's a very articulate woman. And, oh yes, suddenly we all get it, because it's come through like the official healthcare channel rather than the, you know, perhaps over emotional, you know, the expectations, the stereotype of a parent in the room. And I think people who've got, I mean, as you have, that kind of dual or more different perspectives in terms of being a healthcare professional who's also on the other side of the fence with lived experience, it's harder to argue against, and it's quite an interesting angle. But it shouldn't need to be like that. You know, I think we've all had experiences where I just see people saying, you know, I got no idea what it was like to be on the other side of the fence. So people who know the systems and in theory know how to navigate the systems, or as much as any mortal could do, suddenly when it's themselves or their relative or something that's very close to them, you realise what a kind of maze it can all be, and things stacked against you.
Well, look at what happened with the Hello, My Name Is, where you've got a hospital consultant who suddenly finds herself a patient diagnosed with a terminal cancer and is in bed in a hospital and realises that the people in the white coats are just coming up and grabbing her arm and saying, I'm just going to take some of your blood. And she was saying, well, you know, who are you? And it was almost as if, well, you know, doesn't matter who I am. I'm the technician that's come to, I mean, you know, the inference is that, you know, well, I'm here to do a job and you're just the patient that I'm doing the job on. And that's kind of started the whole thing about Hello, My Name Is, you know, introduce yourself, say who you are. The number of times that I get a phone call or I make a phone call to a hospital for some reason and I'm saying, you know, right, I'm Carol Munt, and who are you? Oh, well, you don't need to know my name. So I say, well, actually, I'd prefer to know it. Well, we're not allowed to give names out. And I think, okay, well, that's number one complaint that I'm going to make. And I don't want to be in a position where things are happening and I think I've got to raise that as an issue because that isn't good enough. I'm very outspoken, obviously, as you might have gathered, but there are a lot of people who aren't. And a number of times that I've said to somebody, how did you get on? And they'll say, well, I don't know really. I couldn't understand what they were talking about. You know, the joke I came up with a couple of really bad jokes. And one was the consultant says to the chap in bed, well, I see you've got a DVT. And then the chap says, no, doc, I watch films on my iPlayer these days. Well, you've got to be of a certain age to appreciate that, but
I got that.
Yeah, but I think that is the thing. I mean, all patients are not being treated as people. If you want me to give one message to the new head of the NHS, it's this: please see us as people, and accept that, as I said at the King's Fund, we're an incredibly wealthy source that you can pick on. I said I'm looking at a room of 200 people who are experts in what they do. But if you guys all went home and deputised somebody else to come and take your place tomorrow, I'd be looking at another room full of expertise. It would be a different expertise. I'd probably have bank managers, teachers, cleaners, salesmen, all sorts. But everybody's got something to offer. And when you're thinking about designing something new, then it's worth looking at it from everybody's point of view and not looking at it purely from a clinical point of view, because some of the projects that have been done purely based on clinicians deciding what was best for the patient have flopped dismally, because actually that's not what was best for the patient. So my message is this: please treat us as people, because that's what we are.
I think that's amazing, Carol. And I think you were talking earlier about, the phrase patient leaders and how many people have got something to offer. And obviously all those different conditions that people have lived with, all that different expertise that they can bring. You don't want to get to a point where you've got representative patients that if their particular condition is X, then they're an expert in themselves and to a large extent an expert in that condition. But if you're talking about, I don't know, eyesight or breast cancer or, whatever it is, you want people, co-production needs to be with the people that are actually affected by, whatever's going on, and they're the ones who'll have the expertise to bring. Do you think co-production, the NHS are talking about it being default now in the NHS? Well, that kind of language worries me a bit because, default might go with tick box somewhere, but on the other hand, in terms of it being picked up as something very important and, starting to be the way we do things around here and how that might evolve naturally. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's quite interesting that we have to come up with the terminology about co-production. And I mean, the word co-production is open for debate. The word default is open for debate. So what do we do? Maybe we just say we'll do it together. I mean, that's basically what we're saying, that in future, we'll work together, we'll talk about things, and we will actually... involving patients who come up with ideas is actually beneficial for the staff as well as for the patients. And I think one of the things that I've been trying to do since I was picked up as a patient leader is to find other people who are equally passionate about the NHS, but who perhaps haven't sort of been as ready to bang on doors as I was. And so I think there are several of us that are really passionate about the NHS, really do care about it. But because it's not a closed door, it's not the Masons. I mean, it's not a closed organisation, but it does feel like that sometimes. And I think we've got NHS people, the big drive with the NHS people. And sometimes when I try and click in to get in on something for that, I'm shut out because I'm not an NHS person, I'm a patient. And I'm thinking, I don't see how you can't be an NHS person if you're a patient, because surely that's what the NHS is all about. So we have to start pushing to be recognised as part of the team, because there's an awful lot of energy and an awful lot of expertise out there waiting. I mean, simple thing, the talk I gave at the King's Fund was picked up by the Open University, and then they've been using it on one of their health courses for the last, 4 years or something.
Brilliant.
Well, I mean, I am passionate about involvement, as you may have gathered. So, yeah, we're people, but users, and patients. I mean, yeah, we're patients when we're in bed in a hospital, but we do actually get up and put on our mufti, our day clothes, and go out into the big bad world and, have jobs and families and drive cars or ride horses or perhaps some will live in a super big house, and some will live in really grotty conditions that should be improved. And without realising that there's more to a patient than just the diagnosis, we're never going to get anywhere, because half of the conditions that people have are brought on by a much wider problem than illness. It's why do people have certain illnesses? Why have they got certain conditions? Is it something to do with living conditions, employment, education, what? So if you don't look at a patient as being a person, you ignore all of the things like that, and that's pretty crazy, really, because then I firmly believe that unless you treat patients as people, you can diagnose a condition and you can prescribe a treatment, but unless you actually get to know them as a person, you might as well be wasting your time.
Yeah. And I love the themes that are coming through, although it's so early in the podcast series, and the fact that they're coming from different perspectives. So the episode I did with Dr. Fazana Hussein and the frustration as a GP in terms of trying to help children with asthma, but they live in damp conditions, those kind of examples. So I think, Carol, in terms of your messages for the Chief Exec of the NHS, we've had some real lemon light bulbs. I think teamwork, using the expertise of everyone, whether it's patients, whether it's staff, but that the energy and the willingness to actually be part of this is there. And the kind of final message, let's work together and let's not care whether it's called co-production or whatever labels we put on things. My acid test is that you can go up to someone in the street and they'd understand, let's work together.
Yeah.
The jargon they might not, so let's just go with the plain English.
I think that's a good idea, and I think maybe that's where pirates came into, the original concept of pirates came into it, because they cut through all the BS and got down to the basics and realised that everybody on board ship had to be treated equally, so had to have an equal share of the spoils and had to have an equal share of the food and all the rest of it, had to have equal living conditions, and I think getting rid of hierarchy and let's just all muck in and work together. And I'm sure that will have a much better result all round, and it will be much, much better for the staff, let alone the patients. So, yeah, I'm all for that.
Okay, well, I'm delighted to be with you in your pirate community. And thank you so much, Carol,
for
joining us today. And onwards and upwards. Yeah. Ahoy. Ship ahoy, is it? Yeah. Thanks, Em.
Thank you.
I hope you have enjoyed this episode. If so, please subscribe now to hear more of these fascinating conversations on your favourite podcast platform. And please leave a review. I tweet as Whose Shoes. Thank you for being on this journey with me, and let's hope that together we can make a difference.